The night was unusually quiet, with the moon hanging low in the sky, casting a dim light over the narrow, deserted road. Alex Thompson drove through the countryside, his mind occupied with the mundane struggles of the day. Work deadlines loomed over him, his boss's nagging voice still echoing in his ears. He was supposed to feel relief on this drive back home, but the stress clung to him like a second skin. His headlights pierced the dark, illuminating the road ahead. Alex absent-mindedly turned the dial of the radio, trying to find a station that wasn't playing old rock ballads. Then, something odd appeared in the periphery of his vision. On the side of the road, half hidden by a ditch, lay a large black bin bag. It seemed out of place, especially this far from any houses or towns. He slowed down instinctively, squinting at the bag, which appeared to be moving slightly. Was it his imagination? Maybe it was just the wind? Curiosity got the better of him. Pulling his car to the side, he turned on his hazard lights and stepped out. The cool night air brushed against his face, offering a brief moment of clarity. He moved closer to the bag, and as he did, the movement within became more apparent. Something was definitely alive in there. His heart pounded harder with each step. "What the hell?" he muttered to himself as he crouched down next to the bag. He hesitated for a moment, a sense of dread creeping up his spine. Was it an animal? Or something more sinister? Taking a deep breath, Alex grabbed the edges of the bag and carefully pulled it open. Immediately, a horrible stench hit him, a mix of decay and neglect. He gagged, pulling his shirt up to cover his nose, but the smell wasn't the worst of it. Inside, he saw a pair of terrified, sunken eyes staring up at him. It was a dog. A mangy, skeletal creature, barely alive, trembling in the garbage. The sight was so shocking, so unexpected, that Alex let out a scream, more from shock than fear. The dog whimpered, its body weak and fragile, matted fur clinging to its bones. Who could do something like this? Who would throw a living creature into a bin bag like trash? Alex's initial shock morphed into fury. His hands clenched into fists as he scanned the empty road for any sign of the heartless person responsible. But of course, there was no one around. His anger was raw, white-hot, but the dog needed immediate help. He couldn't let his emotions get in the way. "Hey, it's okay," Alex whispered, his voice shaking with both anger and sadness, as he gently reached out to touch the dog's head. The creature flinched at first, but then relaxed, as if realizing that Alex wasn't going to hurt it. "You're safe now, I've got you." Without wasting another second, he carefully lifted the dog out of the bag. The poor thing was so light, it felt like he was holding a bundle of twigs. Its ribs jutted out from its sides, and patches of fur were missing, leaving raw, irritated skin underneath. The dog let out a soft, pitiful whine, and Alex's heart broke a little more. How long had it been in there? How long had it suffered like this? "You'll be okay. I promise," he whispered, cradling the dog in his arms as he carried it back to his car. Once home, Alex wasted no time. He laid the dog gently on the couch, rushing to grab water and food. The dog looked too weak to move, its eyes barely open, but the moment Alex placed the water bowl in front of it, the dog's tongue flicked out, desperate for the liquid. For the next few days, Alex poured every ounce of care into the dog. He took it to the vet, who was equally horrified at its condition. The dog, whom Alex decided to name Shadow, due to its black coat, was malnourished, dehydrated, and covered in infected wounds. But Shadow was also a fighter. Despite everything, the dog slowly started to recover. His fur began to grow back, his eyes brightened, and he even wagged his tail from time to time. Alex's home, once a quiet and lonely place, now had life and warmth, thanks to Shadow. As the weeks went by, Alex's bond with Shadow grew stronger. The dog followed him everywhere, a loyal companion who seemed to understand the depth of Alex's kindness. But there was something about Shadow that remained unsettling, something that Alex couldn't quite put his finger on. Sometimes in the dead of night, Alex would wake up to find Shadow standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. At first, Alex thought it was just a quirk of the dog, but it started happening more frequently. Shadow would stand there for hours, eyes fixated on something Alex couldn't see. Then came the night that changed everything. Alex was walking Shadow through the neighborhood one evening, the air crisp and cool. They had been doing this every night since Shadow's recovery, and it had become part of their routine. But tonight, something felt off. Shadow was unusually tense, his body rigid as he sniffed the air. Suddenly, the dog pulled on the leash, tugging Alex toward a dark alley. "Whoa, easy there, Shadow," Alex said, trying to rein him in, but Shadow wasn't listening. His body was tense, his ears perked up, and his nose twitched as if he had caught the scent of something important. The dog darted toward the alley, nearly pulling Alex off balance. Reluctantly, Alex followed. As they reached the entrance of the alley, Shadow began growling, a low, dangerous sound that Alex had never heard from him before. His hackles were raised, his eyes glowing with an intensity that sent chills down Alex's spine. "What is it, boy?" Alex whispered, feeling a sudden unease creep into his gut. That's when he saw it, a figure in the shadows, hunched over near a pile of trash bags. At first, Alex thought it was just a homeless person, but as the figure stood up, the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. The man's face was gaunt, eyes wild, and his clothes were filthy. But it was the look in his eyes that unsettled Alex the most. There was something familiar about them, something dark. "Who's there?" Alex called out, his voice more confident than he felt. The man didn't answer. Instead, he smiled, a twisted, malicious grin that made Alex's blood run cold. Then, without warning, the man bolted, disappearing into the maze of alleys before Alex could react. Shadow lunged forward, barking furiously, but Alex held him back. "What the hell was that about?" Alex muttered, his heart racing. He glanced down at Shadow, who was still growling, his eyes locked on the spot where the man had been. In the days that followed, Alex couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. Shadow seemed on edge too, more alert, more protective than ever. It was as if he knew something that Alex didn't. Then one afternoon, as Alex was cleaning out his attic, he found something that made his heart stop. A pile of old newspaper clippings, all related to a string of unsolved animal abuse cases in the area. Dogs and cats found abandoned, beaten, or worse. One article in particular caught his eye. It was about a man who had been suspected of running an underground animal cruelty ring, a man who had disappeared without a trace after being released on bail. The man's face looked disturbingly familiar. It was the same man Alex had seen in the alley that night. Now, everything made sense. The man in the alley, the one who had fled when he saw Alex, was the same monster who had been hurting animals for years. And somehow, Shadow had recognized him. The dog's strange behavior, the growling, the tension. It wasn't just instinct. It was personal. Furious and filled with a new sense of purpose, Alex made a decision. He wasn't going to let this man hurt anyone else. With Shadow by his side, they would find him. They would make sure justice was served. But as Alex geared up for the confrontation ahead, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Alex couldn't sleep that night. The encounter with the man in the alley had rattled him in ways he didn't fully understand. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind replayed the events over and over, trying to piece together a puzzle that was still missing too many pieces. Shadow, who normally curled up peacefully beside the bed, was restless too. He paced back and forth in the bedroom, his ears pricked up, eyes darting toward the door every now and then. It was as if the dog was waiting for something, or someone. In the dim light, Alex glanced at the pile of old newspaper clippings he'd found earlier that day. They were scattered across the floor, their faded headlines and grainy photos, a grim reminder of the evil that lurked not far from his own front door. He knew he couldn't just sit there, paralyzed by fear or uncertainty. The man who had done this, who had thrown Shadow away like trash, was still out there. And if he had abandoned Shadow, how many other dogs had met a similar fate? How many were still suffering because of him? Alex sat up abruptly. The decision was made. He couldn't turn a blind eye to this. Shadow's loyalty had saved him from the worst of his past, and now Alex would return the favor by seeking justice for all the creatures this man had harmed. The next morning, Alex dug deeper into the case, gathering every detail he could find. The man's name was Vincent Moretti, a small-time criminal with a history of animal abuse stretching back years. His arrest had been a media spectacle, but after his release on bail, he had vanished. No one had seen or heard from him in months, until now. It all clicked into place. Vincent must have been back in the area, operating in the shadows, still hurting animals, still getting away with it. Alex's stomach churned with disgust, his mind buzzing with rage. He could have reported the sighting to the authorities, but something held him back. Perhaps it was his own sense of responsibility. He had found Shadow after all, and had been the one to care for him. This felt personal now. Alex knew Vincent wasn't the kind of man who could be easily captured, and it would take more than a vague sighting to convince the police to take action. The image of Vincent's gaunt face haunted him. He could see those crazed eyes, hear the unsettling chuckle that still echoed in his mind. This man was a danger, not just to animals, but to anyone who crossed his path. Alex didn't know how far Vincent would go, but he had a feeling it could get much worse. That afternoon, Alex decided to retrace his steps. He walked with Shadow through the same neighborhood, the same narrow streets. Shadow was unusually alert, his nose twitching at every scent, his head swiveling from side to side. As they reached the alley where they had seen Vincent, Shadow began to growl again, the low rumble vibrating through his chest. His muscles tensed, and he pulled on the leash, eager to investigate further. "I know, buddy. I feel it too," Alex muttered, scanning the alley for any sign of movement. The alley was empty, the piles of trash bags undisturbed. But something felt off. Alex stepped cautiously into the alley, Shadow at his side. They moved slowly, taking in every detail: the graffiti-covered walls, the broken bottles littering the ground, the rusted chain-link fence at the far end. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Alex saw it. A small, tattered notebook half buried beneath a pile of old newspapers. He bent down and carefully pulled it out, dusting off the grime. The pages were weathered and yellowed, some torn, others stained. As he flipped through the notebook, his heart began to race. It wasn't just any notebook, it was Vincent's. The notebook was filled with cryptic notes and symbols, random dates, and what looked like locations scribbled hastily in the margins. But it was the drawings that disturbed Alex the most. Horrific sketches of animals, dogs, cats, even birds, all drawn in grotesque, tortured positions. Some pages had names written under the drawings, while others had a single word: discarded. The weight of the notebook felt heavy in Alex's hands. It was proof. Proof that Vincent was still out there, still hurting animals, still operating under the radar. The notebook seemed to document his twisted obsession, and Alex could feel the rage bubbling inside him. Shadow barked suddenly, pulling Alex out of his thoughts. The dog was staring intently at the far end of the alley, ears flat against his head, teeth bared. Alex's pulse quickened. Someone was there. A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping out slowly, deliberately. It was Vincent. His eyes locked onto Alex with that same twisted smile, and for a moment time seemed to freeze. "Well, well, look who it is," Vincent said, his voice low and rasping. "The guy with the mutt. I thought I recognized you." Alex's blood boiled. He wanted to charge at Vincent, to make him pay for what he had done to Shadow and countless other animals. But something held him back, a deep-seated fear of what Vincent might do if provoked. "I've seen you before," Alex said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I know what you did. I know who you are." Vincent chuckled softly, stepping closer, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You think you know me? You don't know anything. You don't know what it's like to control life and death, to decide who lives and who dies." Alex clenched his fists, his jaw tight. Shadow's growling grew louder, his body trembling with fury. "You're sick!" Alex spat. "You can't keep doing this! It's over!" Vincent's smile widened. "You think it's over? It's never over. There are always more. More to find, more to discard. You can't stop me." The rage in Alex's chest threatened to consume him. He took a step forward, his fists clenched at his sides. But Vincent just stood there, completely unbothered, as if daring Alex to make a move. For a brief moment, Alex considered lunging at him, but he knew it wasn't the answer. Violence would only make things worse. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. "You're done," Alex said, his voice firm. "I'm calling the police." For the first time, Vincent's smug expression faltered. His eyes darted to the phone, and Alex could see the panic creeping into his face. "Don't do that," Vincent hissed, his voice sharp. "You don't know what you're getting into. You have no idea." But Alex didn't care. He had seen enough. He had enough evidence. The notebook, Shadow's condition, the newspaper clippings. He wasn't going to let this monster get away again. He dialed the number, his heart pounding in his chest. Shadow stood beside him, growling low and steady, his eyes never leaving Vincent. As the phone rang, Vincent's mask of arrogance slipped away completely. He looked desperate now, his hands shaking as he backed away. "You'll regret this," Vincent snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret crossing me." Alex held his ground, his eyes locked on Vincent. "No, you're the one who'll regret it." Vincent turned on his heel and fled, disappearing into the maze of alleys once again. But this time, Alex didn't chase him. He had what he needed. Justice would come for Vincent Moretti. The police arrived shortly after, and Alex handed over the notebook, explaining everything he knew. The officers were shocked by the contents and immediately launched a search for Vincent. Days passed, and Alex waited anxiously for news. He didn't know if Vincent would be caught, but he took comfort in the fact that he had done everything in his power to stop him. Shadow stayed by his side through it all, a constant reminder of the cruelty that existed in the world, and the strength it took to fight back against it. Then, one morning, Alex received a call. The police had found Vincent hiding out in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. He had been arrested, and with the evidence Alex had provided, there was no doubt that Vincent would be facing a long prison sentence. Relief washed over Alex. The nightmare was finally over. He knelt down beside Shadow, scratching the dog behind the ears. "We did it, boy," he said softly. "It's over." Shadow looked up at him with those soulful eyes, wagging his tail. And in that moment, Alex knew that no matter what they had been through, they had found something far more important than revenge. They had found each other. The sun set over the quiet neighborhood, casting a warm golden light over the streets. Alex and Shadow walked side by side, their steps in sync, their bonds stronger than ever. The darkness that had once loomed over their lives had lifted, and in its place was a sense of peace. Shadow had been discarded, thrown away like garbage, but he wasn't broken. He had found love, safety, and a home. And Alex, in turn, had found a companion who had taught him what it meant to fight for something worth saving. As they walked into the fading light, Alex knew one thing for certain. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, because sometimes the greatest victories come from the smallest acts of kindness. And in saving Shadow, Alex had saved a deeper part of himself, a part that had long been buried under the weight of stress and loneliness. As the days turned into weeks, Shadow's recovery progressed. With each passing day, the once timid dog grew more confident, more playful. He reveled in the simple joys of life, chasing after sticks, bounding through the grass, and curling up next to Alex in the evenings as they watched movies. Their lives intertwined, creating a sense of warmth and comfort that both had been missing. But the shadows of the past lingered, and Alex remained committed to advocating for animals in need. Inspired by Shadow's resilience, he decided to volunteer at the local shelter, using his experience to help others like Shadow find their forever homes. He shared their story, raising awareness about animal abuse and the importance of adoption. Shadow became a beacon of hope, accompanying Alex to events and touching the hearts of everyone they met. Months later, Alex stood in front of a crowd at a community event, Shadow by his side, as he spoke passionately about their journey. "I found this dog when he was at his lowest, neglected and abandoned," he said, his voice steady. "But he taught me about strength, loyalty, and the power of love. No creature deserves to be thrown away. We all deserve a second chance. The audience responded with applause, and Alex felt a swell of pride. He looked down at Shadow, whose tail wagged furiously, eyes bright with excitement. In that moment, Alex realized that their story was more than just one of survival. It was a story of redemption, a testament to the bond between humans and animals. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the park, Alex felt a sense of closure. Vincent Moretti was behind bars, and his reign of terror was over. The fear that had once gripped him was replaced by a sense of purpose. He had taken a stand against cruelty, and in doing so, had created a safe haven for animals in need. With Shadow by his side, Alex knew they could face anything the future held. Together, they had overcome the darkness, emerging stronger and more connected than ever. As they walked home under the twinkling stars, Alex whispered to Shadow, "We're in this together, buddy, always." And in the silence of the night, the two of them ventured forward into a future filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and like this video. We release a brand new video every day, so stay tuned to this space. Please leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care and see you in the next video.